Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode here on African Confessions. The following story that you're going to be listening to, it comes from an email that we received. Hello, Confessions family. Welcome to this epic episode. We received an email and this person requested to be anonymous. Therefore, we shall be keeping him as anonymous. The confession reads like this. Good morning, Brother Nashi. Please keep me anonymous. I am a man who is in his late 30s, and as I am writing to you, I am now based in Dubai, but the story, it happened a few years ago, whilst I was still in Zim, struggling to make ends meet. Let me say I am not a very prayerful man, but I know and I fear the Lord. And in all of these incidents, I know that the prayers of my mother, they are the ones that really played a part in keeping me safe at all the times. Never underestimate the power of prayer, for the kingdom of darkness is weakened each and every time when we pray. I am the eldest grandchild, and I had to rush to the village to see our cows. At that time, our cattle back in the village, they had been infected with a disease, and these cows of ours, they were dying. They were really dying. Our livestock were being finished off by the evil one. I took a bus back to the village and I left early in the morning. I had to go early in the morning because I wanted to come back the same day because I had to go to work the following day. Well, when I arrived home, and I left the medication for the cows, and as a black man, you can't just arrive and leave within a short space of time. I made sure that my grandparents had firewood and all that she needed. Well, I had to leave at around 7. Well, the bus stop was very far, so I walked from around 4 p.m. and I arrived at this bus station. It was really late. I could not see anything. It was so dark on that day. It was around 7 p.m. when I reached the bus stop. My grandparents had told me that it was not going to be easy to get a lift, but I insisted on leaving on that same night because I had to go to work the following day. I waited and I waited, my brother. I waited until it was somewhere around 9 p.m. That was when I saw a car. This car was coming, and the car, when it approached me, I waved so that the driver can stop. Well, when that car stopped, I then spoke to the driver, who seemed to be very strange, because the first thing that I noticed that was really strange about this driver was that when I spoke to the driver, he did not look at me, and he acted as if he was a robot. It was kind of like funny. So I thought that maybe this man, he was high, smoking marijuana, or what, he was stoned. So as I was speaking with him, he never looked at me. He looked directly ahead without even turning his face so as to see who had stopped him by the side of the road. I spoke with the driver and I asked him if he was going to where I was going, and he said, not a problem. This place where you are, it is not a safe place for a young man like you, so you need to jump into the car quickly as you can. Well, I jumped into the car. I was sitting just behind him and I thanked him so much. We drove and we drove until I finally fell asleep. The next time, as I opened my eyes, it was sunrise, and I was shocked to see that I was actually sitting on top of a rock, my brother. I was sitting on top of a rock in the middle of the road at that same bus stop. Brother Nashi, I stood up confused and I thought to myself, was I dreaming? Was I still dreaming? What was going on? Was I still traveling in that same car? Because everything that had happened the previous night and everything that I was seeing like right now, there was a huge gap, and I could not even remember what had actually happened to me. Brother Nashi, as I stood up, I kept on looking around, and indeed I saw that this was not a dream, but it was actually reality. I was still back in the village. I was still at the same place, and within a short period of time, I was shocked. As I was still shocked, villagers who were going to the fields noticed my confusion, and when people saw that I was walking around as if I was a madman, someone who was gradually losing their mind, most of these villagers that were going to their different fields. They stopped by, and one by one, they asked me what was wrong with me, like in our African tradition. Even if there are 10 people, each and everyone will ask you what is wrong with you, and you have to narrate the story over and over again. I narrated my story until I grew hungry. I told each and every villager that was passing by, even children, they would even ask me what was wrong with me, why was I moving up and down. Well, I then met up with this other old man. I narrated my story, and the old man that I was talking to asked about this car. He said, this car that you said that you got into, if I may ask, did it happen to be a red car? I then said yes, and he then apologized, and he said that I am really sorry, my son, because this car that you said it stopped for you, and you are now saying that it is a red car. Well, if it was a red car, my apologies, because you saw the ghost of my son. And when he said that if the car was a red car that I got into, well, it was the spirit, the dead spirit of his late son, then it meant that this thing that had happened to me, I had to get a cleansing. I was like, what? He then said, yes, a spirit, a man died at this same area. He was involved in a car accident, and at night a lot of villagers have been offered a lift by this spirit, the spirit of my son. I was scared because I had noticed some unusual things about the driver, because this driver, my brother, I had even joked. I thought that maybe this man, he was a Terminator. Maybe he was Arnold Schwarzenegger. I even asked him if he had ever watched the Terminator before, because the way that he was dressed, who drives at night whilst wearing some sunglasses and a black leather jacket? This is what he was wearing. But this man, he never laughed. He never responded to me. Oh, my brother, that was when I started saying I should have listened to my grandparents. Just like any other Zimbo man, I was earning a basic salary of less than $600 a month, and I had family and kids who needed to go to boarding school. So after work every day during the week, I had to use my car as my side hustle for transporting people from work or cross borders who usually arrive early in the morning. It was like a metered taxi, but I would make city to city rides to drop off to. This meant that on my off day, I would actually return back this car, because this car that I had, it belonged to this other man. You know how this metered taxi back in our country work. A person will give you the car, then the person will say you can use the car as much as you can. Then on that day when I had returned back to the village, that was when I had actually met up with this ghost, Brother Nashi. When I saw everything that had happened, and when I heard that I had actually seen a ghost, it was the most terrifying thing that had ever happened to me. Well, I then returned back to Harare so that I can continue with my job. On this other particular day, I was on my way to Harare, to the capital city, and I had passengers in my car. This is what people need to know. Once you have a spiritual encounter, then it seems as if there is a spiritual eye that will be opened in your mind, because now I was able to see spirits. So on this other trip, I was driving that 7-seater car, and as we drove off after loading the car, I felt very uncomfortable. We had a baby in the car, and the baby started to cry, and I knew that one of the passengers most probably would be a person who practiced traditional things, or maybe someone who had evil herbs with them. Little did I know that in the car we had someone who was more than evil than that. I then texted my mom and I told her to pray for me so that I can have a journey filled with mercy. I kept on praying too in my heart as we drove, and we got to a stretch where it is mostly farms and there is nothing much. That is when I saw one passenger, a lady who was in her mid-30s, taking a bag, and she stood up as I was driving between 120 to 140 kilometers. Mind you, this was not a bus. There is not much space in the car. Within a split second, I saw her just like that. She walked out of the car, Brother Nashi. She went right in front of the car and crossed from left to right and did not get hit by the car. I looked back, and it is true, where she was seated before, there was no one, and I kept on driving, and my legs, they were really shaking. And I want to thank God that at this time I was driving an automatic car, because all that I did was that I removed my foot from the accelerator pedal so that this car can slow down just a little bit, but I was afraid to totally stop the car. I then asked the passengers if they saw what I had seen. And most of the people that I was carrying in my car, just for a few seconds when this thing had happened, they had all fell asleep, and none of them ever saw what had happened. When I woke them up, they were all shocked to see that she was gone. They kept on saying that maybe you stopped by the side of the road. It's only after one of the passengers looked at the time when he had been speaking with his wife, the conversation that they were having, that was when he saw that it was less than 2 minutes that had passed. I then said, was it even possible for me to stop and drop someone, then immediately speed off at 120, 140, the speed at which I was traveling at when I had woken up all of my passengers? Brother Nashi, I arrived home and I became very sick for about 6 months, and I was grounded. I went to the doctors. They did all the tests, but they came back negative. One day my mom decided to call the pastor, and then they started praying for me. That was when I was able to recover. My brother, this was such a complicated issue, because whenever I would try to tell people that this is what had happened to me, but my brother, no one ever believed me when I told them that I saw the spirits of the dead twice. My brother, no one ever believed me. But I think that once you have a spiritual encounter, forever, your life will forever be changed. Anyone that has never had a spiritual encounter, it is easy for them to say that spirits do not exist. But my brother, there is another world, a world where a world in which we can even go to, but we do not know that there is another world that is just parallel to this world in which we find ourselves in. I do believe in these spirits because I saw ghosts. I saw the spirit of the dead twice. Dear listeners, right there was a message that was sent to me by one of our admins. It was forwarded to me after our admin had received this email.